Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk in the somewhat wet, damp, and dreary Scottish county of Midlothian. Yeah, it's pretty wet and miserable here tonight, unfortunately, but hey, it is what it is. We're strong. We'll take whatever weather comes our way, but it's got to be better than the ice rink that we've had recently and the snow that we've had. It's been really icy. It's been a bizarre start to March, I'll tell you that much. It's supposed to be kind of the beginning of spring, and spring just refuses to be springing at the moment. It's a little bit disorientating, to say the least. I'm feeling sorry for daffodils and crocuses at the moment. They must be like, what the heck is going on? Anyway. As you've probably gathered by now, I like to start my shows with something bizarre. And there you go, that was something bizarre. Alright, so my good friend Keith at Radio Tuck Frumpet was first in the door, a whole hour and 19 minutes early, followed by John Edgar and my good friend Rich at Studio One Toots, and Billy Morgan, Kyle Trudruziak is here, Mike Johnson at Music to Motion is here, and a new visitor to our show, Lance Dapple, is here as well. Welcome, Lance. And of course, Tura Shiva is here. And Sean White and Mark Holsley is here as well. I think you're new as well. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. If you have a question regarding songwriting, arranging, composing, and music theory and that kind of thing, get them in the chat. And don't forget to type at Jonny Lipsham Studios first, and then your question, so that way I can pick out your question from among all the rest of the chat. And Don Oliver is here, Donna Knight is here, and Stu Pendus is also here from Tokyo. Awesome, I'm glad you're here. Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit. I bit into my tongue earlier this afternoon, and it's swollen up quite a bit on one side, so it's very sore. And so I'm kind of struggling talking a wee bit, but we'll get through it. Because I'm strong. And it's not the only part of my body that's not working properly at the moment. For those of you that know, I have cellulitis in my left leg, which means my left leg has gone and is very, very sore. It has swollen quite dramatically. And yeah, it's pretty sore at the moment. So not exactly been able to get out of the house for the last couple of weeks, which is not much fun. But it is what it is, and we will cope. We will cope. So tonight's subject, because I actually thought of a subject for tonight, is to do with the dominant chord. Why is chord 5 called the dominant chord? And why is it so damn domineering? Why is it so dominant? Why is it so powerful? Well, it effectively is, other than the tonic, the home chord of the key that you're in, the strongest chord in the whole of music, particularly Western music. I mean, there are other musical cultures, other musical styles around the world where they don't have this tonic-dominant relationship. This tonic-dominant relationship has evolved over maybe the last 700-800 years of Western music, and kind of started to become a thing in the beginning of the Baroque period, or as they say in the United States, Baroque. Sure why they say it that way, but anyway, kind of around the beginning of the Baroque period, this relationship between 1 and 5, tonic, which is the home chord or the home note of the key that you're in, and chord 5, which is the dominant. So in the key of C major, we're talking about C major being the tonic and the dominant being G. Why is G so powerful and so dominant? And how can we make the best use of its power? Now, Baroque music features this tonic-dominant relationship more and more strongly as you go through the period. And then you get into the classical music where it really came into its own. And the orchestra became a big thing. And of course, when writing for orchestras, compositional styles like symphony became a big thing, and concerto. And So this tonic-dominant relationship was explored to its max by people like Handel and Mozart and Beethoven and all of those people during the classical period, where you have a section of music that's in the tonic, and then it goes to the dominant, and then it goes back. And you have this back and forth between tonic and dominant, and other related keys as well, but mostly the tonic and the dominant. So it became really, really, really important. So how can we in 2023, mostly not writing classical music or orchestral music, although some of you guys do that, like my friend Rich at Studio One Tuts, he does write orchestral music, and I have many other friends that do so as well in the 21st century. So it is important. So it's important that we kind of explore why it's so powerful and how we can maximize its power, because the dominant is the key to unlocking a whole bunch of music and a whole bunch of being able to go from one key to another like you've never been able to do before. It's very, very powerful. So let's take a look at it very briefly. And we do have a question from John Edgar, which we will get to. And if there are any others, please get them in the chat and we will explore them. All right, so tonic in C major is the chord of C. Let's move this mic over a wee bit. It's the chord of C in C major. And chord 5 is built on G. So this would be G, B, D, or you can put the notes in a different order. So why is this relationship so powerful? So we have chord 1 and chord 5. So this is how most classical music goes. It goes chord 1 to chord 5, 5, 7, 5, 7, dominant 7 chord to chord 1 again. And then we do that again. Maybe go to chord 4, and then we'll do a 2-5-1, and that's essentially the harmonic language or the harmonic structure, super simplified, of classical period music from the classical period. So I'm talking about Mozart's lifetime. And Beethoven's lifetime is kind of what I'm talking about when I talk about classical period music. That's what I'm referring to. I know that in the broad sense, when we say classical music, we mostly think of orchestral music and music for orchestral instruments. Because that's what we broadly define it as. We broadly define it as classical music, even though classical music specifically refers to music from the period, the lifetimes of Mozart and Beethoven in particular. So anything from 1570, 1560 maybe, all the way through to the end of Beethoven's life is really kind of the period of, or sort of maybe the middle of Beethoven's life, because Beethoven was a pioneer and he pioneered a lot of things that became what we would later call the Romantic period. Expanded the whole symphonic idea that Mozart had developed from Handel, and expanded the harmonic palette, and actually being able to take this tonic-dominant relationship to its natural conclusion, which is being able to go to all sorts of different keys. So how can we get this into our music, especially if we're writing pop songs, or we're writing country ballads, or we're writing blues music, or we're writing rock and roll? Well, this is all to your power. So the 5 chord is really, really powerful, because by using it, you can go anywhere. It is the master key that unlocks all 12 other major keys and all 12 other minor keys. It's incredibly powerful. But, and here's the but here, if I'm in C major and I use chord 5 from C major, I'm bound pretty much to be in C major, and that's going to get very boring. But if I use chord 5 from E flat major, which is going to be B flat 7, I can go, and and that'll take me to the key of E flat, just like that. See what I did there? I did a 5-1 to D flat, so A flat 7 takes me to D flat, and now I'm going to go back. G, C. It's that powerful. So chord 5 needs to be chord 5 of the target key. Wow, I punched my keyboard. Never a clever plan. It needs to be chord 5 of the target key. So if you're going to the key of G, you need a D. And then to get back to C, you need G7 to take you to C, because that's chord 5. And then to D, back to D again, A7, D, B7, E, and then E7, A. And then I can go back to D, and then I can go to G, and then I can go back to C. And I've done the sharp side, for the most part, of the circle of fifths. Now I can go the other way, and I can go into flats. So I can go C, C7, F, F7, E flat, E flat 7, E flat, E flat 7, A flat, E flat 7, D flat, D flat 7, G flat, G flat 7, C flat. And then I can go back. G7, C. So can you see how incredibly powerful chord 5 is? It can get you anywhere, providing you know how to count. If you know how to count to 5, you can go anywhere, anytime, any place, any style of music. You can go anywhere. All you need to do is go, okay, so I'm in the key of C. I want to go to the key of A flat. A flat is 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aha! I need an E flat chord. So, start with chord 1 in C, E flat 7, A flat. And there you've arrived in the key of A flat major. Or you could do it in A, you could go to A flat minor. You could really screw the mind of your listener by being nice and bright and happy in C major. So you could be writing a song here about your favorite toilet or your favorite toilet paper. I know we've talked about toilet paper before on Songwriting Simplified, but let's say we have our favorite toilet, but it's also the cat's favorite toilet, and the cat has learned how to pee perching herself on the ledge on basically the edge of the toilet seat, and is usually pretty good at it. Doesn't make a mess, and has even learned how to flush. Clever cat, you might say. But what if accidentally, one day, our cat got a little bit arrogant, shall we say, a little bit cocky. And let's say that on this particular occasion, they thought that they could just casually lean to flush the toilet instead of how they normally do it. And they accidentally fall in to the toilet. That's a bad day, isn't it? And now we're in E flat minor. But it's okay, because you saw it happening and you're able to rescue the cat. Happy days again. And hey presto, we're back in the key of C major. See how powerful this whole dominant thing is? It can totally take your listener in a completely different direction just by one chord. We call that a pivot chord. So chord 5 in this context is a pivot. It pivots to a new key. It's like a springboard. Pivot, springboard, two useful analogies. Pick whichever one you like and use that one. So chord 5 is a springboard, a pivot, whatever, a catapult even. You pull it back, patoing, you let go, and you're catapulting your music into a new key. And you can repeatedly do this. Like I showed you, you can make a whole sequence of 5 ones. Surprised everybody there by going back to C minor, not C major. Just by using that chord 5 as a pivot. And I went all the way around the flat side of the circle of fifths, and then I went to C minor instead of C major, just to keep you guys on your toes. So there you go, chord 5 and all of its incredible power. It has so much power and can really catapult your music to wherever you want it to go. Like I illustrated there with the very silly song about the cat. You can go from major to minor just by using one pivot chord. You know, you can be happy in C major and then go to E flat minor. And now I'm in G minor. Back in C major. It's arguably the easiest way to get from one key to any other key, from one from major to minor, incredibly easily. Now I've talked about 2-5-1s. Now all a 2-5-1 is taking that 5 chord, that dominant chord, that incredibly powerful dominant chord, and putting a secondary dominant chord in front of it, which is chord 2, which is in the key of C major, D minor. B7, wasn't it? Should we do that again? So essentially, all I'm doing there is extending that whole dominant tonic relationship by one chord further to the left by putting a chord 2 in front of it. Now, you can take this further and you can put another chord in front of that. And you can put a chord 6 in front of the chord 2 and get the 6-2-5-1. Or you can put another chord in front of that and get 3-6-2-5-1. And already you've got an entire set of chord changes already worked out for you. You don't have to do any composing work whatsoever. 3, 6, 5, 1. Just to jazz up the harmony a little bit. So that's how powerful this whole tonic dominant thing is, because each one of those chords that I have put in front of chord 5 is a chord 5. Effectively, I'm going 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, except each one is a new 5. All right, so 2 could also be D7, which is 5 of 1. And then in G major, which could also be 5 of 1 in C major. Which is why you can go E7, A7, D7, G7, C. And you can just go all the way round. All of those is a 5 going to a 1, which becomes a new 5, going to a 1, which becomes a new 5, going to a 1, which becomes a new 5, and so on and so forth. And you can just keep going round and round that. And that's all a set of chord changes that are incredibly powerful that you can use to unlock anything in Western major minor tonal equal temperament system. It'll get you anywhere. So put that in your toolkit. And if you've got any questions relating to that, get them in the chat as well. But let's go back to see what other questions we've got. And we've just got the one, which is John Edgar's question. He says, please discuss the importance of creating a rhythmic texture in music, both harmonic and melodic, and their combined effect on capturing the listener's ear. Yeah. So you can create rhythmic textures by using different rhythms. And you can have rhythms opposed to each other to create tension, or you can have rhythms playing together in and that on its own creates a tension. Think about the Imperial March in Star Wars. That starts off with the strings with the backs of their bows going dun 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 dun. Everybody's playing that, and then you get the brass playing that melody from the Imperial March. And that's kind of how that starts. You've got two different things. You've got the triplets, the busy triplets of the dun 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 dun, and then you've got the strident brass going bum 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 ba bum bum ba bum, like that. So you've got the brass all on the quarter notes, bum bum bum. Those first three notes, all tonic notes, at the same time as you've got dun 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 in the strings. And so right there, you've got two different rhythmic things going on that create tension, not only in and of themselves, but also juxtaposed to each other. And so it does create this very, very strong pulse. Those two rhythms together. They create a very, very strong pulse, which is why it is a march. And, Williams wanted to capture this idea of imperialism, dominance, strength, and power in a march. So, minor key, that's the first thing, because it's dark, because we're talking about the empire of the dark side. So minor key to start with, a tempo that is good for walking or marching to. Any faster than that tempo and it would be hard, it would be uncomfortable. Couldn't really do it. Then you've got the busy triplet-based rhythm of the strings, and then you've got the strident brass. Strings and brass kind of in opposition to each other. You've got strings playing low in their registers and playing dark and percussive. And then you've got the brass, bright, powerful, strident in opposition. And those two things make for something that really grabs the listener's attention, because, the music is basically saying, listen up, here comes Darth Vader. Listen up, here comes Emperor Palpatine. Or here come a bunch of Star Troopers. Or whatever. The idea is to grab your attention so that you are looking on the screen and your attention is drawn to what's on the screen, and you are identifying this music with these characters. And you know they're baddies, and you know that they are powerful. And the music is helping convey that. Now, if you just saw that scene without the music, you'd go, okay, these look like they might be bad guys. You might not be sure. Okay, Palpatine's wearing a dark robe and a hood, and Darth Vader's in a black suit, and you've got some other stormtroopers in red with red cloaks. They look a little bit scary. And then you've got the stormtroopers who are in white plastic kind of you can't really, it's kind of battle dress, not really uniforms, I suppose. So visually, those are quite strident and quite strong. But when you bring the music in, and you bring that theme tune, and the strings and the brass and the timpani, which play at various points as well to provide some extra percussion and to provide a little bit of color as well, suddenly you've got something very, very cool and very powerful and evocative of what you're seeing on the screen. Now, a composer that was around maybe 100 years beforehand, maybe just a bit, maybe 50, 60 years beforehand, Gustav Holst, in the first movement of the Planet Suite from Mars, had a very, very similar idea of this ostinato, which is the repeated figure. So in Star Wars you have dun, 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 and in Mars the Planets you have this thing in 5/4, not 4/4, which is what you have in Star Wars. But the what is achieved is very, very similar. This ostinato in 5/4, ostinato in 4/4, but it does the same thing. It sets up something to convey power. There's a lot of dissonance in Mars, and there's a lot of juxtaposing rhythms. Like as you go forwards, you hear trumpets and French horns, almost kind of doing a call and response, interrupting each other all the time. But they're copying each other, and they're actually offset against each other at a couple of different points. And it builds up to a crescendo where the whole orchestra is playing the ostinato. And then you get the melody again in the pedals of the organ for the first time. And then you get, and doubling that, you get the low brass and the low woodwinds at the same time, whilst all the upper strings and the upper woodwinds are all playing the ostinato. And the snare drum is playing the ostinato for the first time as well. So it's really, really big and powerful. So that's how you can grab your listener's attention, using rhythm, either rhythms that are opposing to each other to create tension, and you can do some panning tricks as well. So you can have one rhythm in the left, one rhythm in the right, opposing each other. And that will actually give you a whole bunch of width to your sound as well. So whether you're doing this in a classical context or whether you're doing this in a rock context. For example, in a rock context, with your rhythm guitars, it might be quite good to have not only two different guitars and two different amplifiers, maybe with two different microphones, but also to have two different set of chord voicings. So you're maybe playing the same chords, but one is playing low down, the other one's playing higher up the guitar, and then also playing different strumming patterns, different rhythms. So maybe one is playing a more conventional kind of pattern, and then the other one is playing something that is the opposite or offset from the other guitar. And you have two guitars kind of juxtaposing each other, one on the left, one on the right, and that will give you a whole bunch of width as well. So rather than having them both playing the same thing, although you can do that, but that is another way to achieve that. That's a good question. Sean White says, do you guys have a daylight Groundhog Day that we have in the United States? No, we don't. Sometimes it feels like we do. But no, we don't. Lance says, do you have an example of this kind of change in songwriting? I'm struggling to hear how it'd be useful in more pop contexts. I make keyboard pop music to sing to my wife mostly. Okay, that's cool. I like that. So, for example, there's an example. Now, what did I do there? Well, I started out with chord 1 going to 2, 5, 1. And this just reinforces that we're in F major. And then I did A, 7, chord 5 in D major, or D minor. And I think in this case I went to major, I think. which is chord 5 in G, and then C, and then I went F with the 3rd in the bass, up to chord 4, which is B flat, chord 2 major with the 3rd in the bass, to take me to chord 5 again. And then that takes you back to 1. And that basically is just an extended chord 1 that just kind of stretches out that dominant thing for just a little bit longer. So 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, and then A7, which is 5 in D, D, which is 5 of G, G, which is 5 of C, C, which is 5 of F. So we're going back to F, but this time we put the 3rd in the bass, and then chord 4, and then we're climbing up in the bass, chord 2 major with the 3rd in the bass, to chord 5, and then I'll do chord 4 with 5 in the bass, and then that takes you back to chord 1. Okay, so there's a little example of how that little 3-6-2-5-1 thing can be really powerful, because although I did A and I said it was 5 of D, which it is, and then D is 5 of G and G is 5 of C, all of that is true, but since fundamentally we are in F major, I'm essentially going 3, 6, 2, 5, and then 1 with 3rd in the bass, climbing to 4, to 2 with 3 in the bass, to 5. And that's a pop song written on the spot in the moment. I didn't even think about it. I literally engaged no thought processes in doing that. I was actually thinking about what time I need to get up in the morning. To be really honest, I was not really thinking about it. But here's the thing, because I have developed my musical vocabulary so that I know what chords go with what and in what key and how to get around, because I've been doing this for long enough now, then it becomes quite easy for me to go, okay, we're in F major. I can just, I'm not really sure where to go, but I know that 2-5-1s work. So 2-5-1. I hadn't really thought about where to go next, so let's go again. And then I thought, well, why not 3-6-2-5-1? 3, 6, 2, 5. But then how about we delay that going back to 1 just for a minute and climb up. And now I'm back to 1. I delayed getting back to 1 by using this climbing bass thing. And then that allowed me to get back to 1, which could well be where I start my chorus. If I imagine that this is my verse. This is my middle section. And then you could start your chorus at this point, wherever that might go. But that's just something I knocked up, if you'll pardon the expression, because that's a little bit risque to say that, without really thinking about it. It's just a bunch of chords that I know all work together, because they're all based on those 5-1 relationships. So I hope that that was a good enough example for you, Lance. Isn't there a Charlie Parker tune, says Sean, where the changes are built on this idea of fifth? There are plenty. If you listen to any variation of the chord changes to Gershwin's I Got Rhythm, you'll notice that you've got this 1, 6, 3. Hang on, how's it go? And then you've got an elongated B section, which is an extended 6-2-5-1. And so, you know, those variations on the chord changes to I Got Rhythm, they're all based around 2-5-1 and 3-6-2-5-1. So I reckon, you know, Gershwin probably wrote that in about 4 or 5 minutes, because it's all based around standard intervallic relationships between one chord and the next within a particular key. The trick with Charlie Parker is being able to improvise on those changes. But that's a really good question. Let's see, what else do we have? Turashiva says, what or how many chord changes suggestions do you have for R&B, soul, or blues genres? There are plenty. Now, blues is based around a similar thing, except maybe a few less chords. It depends upon the blues. It could be a blues ballad from the 1950s, which has a lot more colorful chords. But if we're not going to deal with that, because, you know, that can get very complex very quickly. Let's say we're just dealing with a standard blues, then really we're only talking about chords 1, 4, and 5. So in the key of G major. Again, going back to 1. And there I did a 6-2-5-1. I went chord 1. 6, 2, 5, 1. At the end, there's a turnaround, what we call a turnaround, to get back to the top of the next blues chorus. So that would be blues, R&B, soul. They borrow from, you know, quite a lot of the same kind of material. Everything is blues essentially, but R&B tends to be a little bit more harmonically complicated. There's maybe lots more major sevens. There's more alterations to the chords, because R&B borrows a lot more heavily from jazz harmony than it does from blues. But there's a lot of blues built into R&B as well. So a lot of the emotion and the mood of blues is deeply embedded into R&B. But the harmonic language is a little bit more similar to jazz and also to gospel music. But yeah, I hope that kind of helps answer that question. Lance says, thank you for your excellent example. Beautiful chords. No problem. Donna Knight says, how does this work, substituting a dominant 7th chord? I was wondering if somebody would bring up substitute chords. I think, was it last week or the week before, I kind of talked a little bit about tritonal substitution. I'll kind of cover it again in brief, but it's a little more complicated than I'm going to give you here. But essentially, what we're doing is, let's say our chord is G. Now, a tritonal substitution basically means you take a chord that is 3 whole steps away from that G. So G to A, that's 1. A to B, that's 2. B to C sharp or D flat, that's 3. So our substitute chord is going to be built on D flat. Now, we're talking 7th chords in this case. So G7, let's take the 5 out of there. And let's take the root out of there as well, from my right hand. Don't need it. So let's take the bass note, the root, the 7th, and the 3rd. Now, if I take this bass note and move it up that tritone, I have now the same two notes in the right hand from a D flat 7 chord as I do with a G7 chord. See how my right hand has not changed? It's playing these notes, which is actually a tritone, F to B. That's an interval of a tritone. F to G is a tone, another tone, and then another tone. Tritone. Which is why D flat 7 can totally replace G7. So if I'm going from chords, let's say I'm doing a 2-5-1 in C. So D minor, G7, C. That's a 2-5-1. Now, we know that D flat 7 will perfectly do the job of G7 because it has those two notes in common. So let's just take the bare bones of this chord here, root and third. Okay, move this note down one note. And there is my C major, so we're going. And it works perfectly. If I add in all the other notes, it does exactly the same job. Does exactly the same job. So that, in fact, what Donna is talking about there, about substituting, this is another reason why the dominant chord is the most powerful chord in all of Western tonal music. Because it allows you to substitute one chord for another perfectly. That is a tritone away. Which means you can sneak from one key to another with your listener not even noticing. Like I did just then. I went 2-5-1 in C using the D flat 7, and then I went and that snuck me into B flat, and then I did A7 sharp 5, that snuck me into A flat, and you never even noticed that I changed key, and then G7 back to C. It just works. So tritonal sub is incredibly powerful. How would I make that 2-5-1 more crunchy? Add more dissonance. Add more notes. So turn that chord 2 into a 7 sharp 9 sharp 5. And then do the same for the maybe make the 5 into a 13 flat 5 or 13 sharp 11 chord. And then the 1 could be C major 9 or C major 13 sharp 11. So yeah, you could totally do that. You could go. And there I did sharp 9 sharp 5 for the chord 5. G7 sharp 9 sharp 5. Sounds beautiful. And you can actually use that as an interruption as well. So I'm going chord 5, sharp 9 sharp 5. Everyone's expecting me to go back to chord 1, and instead I go to G flat. G flat major. And then I go to chord 5, which is now kind of a suspended chord. I've got F major 7 over G. Let's make that even more tense. Let's use A flat major 7 over G. And then E flat with the 7th in the bass, taking me down to C major 7 flat 5. So you can make 2-5-1s as crunchy and as dissonant as you want by altering notes, adding notes to the chords that you then alter. So things like 13s, sharp 11s, flat 9s, sharp 9s, sharp 5s. Adding all of those to the chords, you can make it sound a lot more interesting. And, you know, for the most part, you would associate that kind of harmonic palette with jazz music, but it's not 100% true, because that harmonic palette comes from classical music of the late 1920s, 1930s. If you listen to the music of people like the early period of Berlioz, and Berlioz was around much in maybe the 1940s, 1950s. But if you listen to his music harmonically, but you also listen to Schoenberg and Webern and Berg from the end of the 19th century into the beginning of the 20th century, they were playing with dissonant harmony just like that. And also Debussy and Ravel. Ravel and Debussy in particular were into parallel ninth chords, so taking a ninth chord and moving it around. So, you know, they were into all that kind of stuff, but they're also into whole tone scales and building harmony out of whole tone scales. Which sounds all a little bit weird, but if you're into that kind of thing, then you can certainly apply it and make use of it. Let's see. I think we reached the end of the chat. I'm not seeing any further questions. I'm just going to pop up to the top and see if I have missed anything. There's a few retracted messages here. Yeah, and other than that, I'm not seeing anything else. So we've got about 6 minutes left until the end of the show. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and things. We've done really well. We peaked at about 23 people, and it looks like as soon as I started talking about extended harmony, people just started to run away. But it is what it is. So, you know, it's jazz harmony, extended harmony is not going to be everybody's thing. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Speaking of cup of tea, I have one. You know, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. It's going to be some people's cup of tea, but not necessarily everybody's thing. And actually, you know, extended harmony like that will not necessarily fit all styles of music, but you'll find it splashed about here and there. Like the 13 sharp 11 chord, and the sharp 9 sharp 5 chord you will hear on Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms record. Crops up a few times there. You know, you'll hear this. And then there's this one as well. It's going down to the A minor. So B flat 7 sharp 11. Going down to the A minor. Works really nicely. And you'll hear that on that record. So, you know, there's plenty of good pop songs out there that actually have a really advanced harmonic palette that you probably have never even really noticed because you've not really sat down to really listen to the chord changes. But they're there. A good example is Your Latest Tricks from that particular record, where you'll hear in several spots actually in that song that there's some definite jazzier sounding chords. And that's not just because you've got Michael Brecker playing tenor saxophone, you've got Randy Brecker playing trumpet as well on that record, on that particular song. But it is a very traditional pop song in a lot of ways. So extended jazz harmony can be appropriated to pretty much right down the middle of the road pop songs. So Lance, if you're still listening, you can definitely make use of more complex chord changes and more complex harmonic language in a straight ahead pop song, and particularly keyboard orientated pop song. I would definitely recommend you explore expanding your harmonic palette. I think it will make a real difference to your songs that you do for your wife, and I think she would be very, very proud of you, and I think she'd be very pleased with your results as well. So, and of course, it's just other colors. It's just other colors that you can add to your color palette for making music with. I mean, that's why I dived so deep into harmony and musicology when I was in my teens and my 20s, was because I figured the more I know and the more I understand about how all of these things work, then the more I've got to be able to make music with. And I'm less likely to run out of ideas. That was my thinking. That is still kind of my thinking. So there you go. All right, folks, we will end the show here. Mike has an after show Zoom, which you would all be very welcome to join. And Sean is saying it's not unusual by Tom Jones uses the chord 5, the 5 chord pretty heavily. Yes, it does. It goes chord 1, and then a 2, and then a 5, and then back to 1. Certainly in the verse it does that a lot. So, which is kind of what I did for Lance there, essentially. Tony says, I play a chord on a song that's comprised of D, F sharp, D, E. Can't find the name to it. Well, that is going to be... It's basically just a D add 9. That's all it is. Or a D add 2. Depends on your perspective and your outlook on life. Alright, there we go, folks. Have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And I will see you on Sunday for Sunday Night Live. Not Saturday Night Live. Somebody on Facebook thought that I was calling it Saturday Night Live. No, that's another show entirely on a TV network in the United States. No, this is Sunday Night Live. That happens on a Sunday here on this channel at 6 p.m. Central Time. All right, folks, enjoy the rest of your evening. Enjoy the rest of your week. I hope you have a great one. And I'll see you on Sunday for Sunday Night Live. Until then, folks, I wish you all a very good night. Cheers.